All right, well, good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to today's Conviron Scholars Workshop. We're going to be talking today about careers for plant scientists in industry and consulting. And before we get started, I just want to remind all of our students again to go ahead and self-mute during the workshop, and please feel free to unmute if you have a question or comment for our panel. And if you're not able to unmute and use that feature, you can also use the chat feature, which a lot of people got used to last week, and then Mary or I will be able to ask the questions to our panelists. We have a great panel joining us today. Our panelists all started their careers as plant scientists and then followed various paths through their current careers. We have April Agee Carroll, who is currently the Vice President of Research and Development at AeroFarms and a Vice Chair at IPPN. And we also have Miguel Vega-Sanchez joining us, who's the Regulatory Pipeline Strategy Manager at Monsanto. So I'm going to go ahead and give each of you a few minutes just to introduce yourselves in more detail. April, would you like to go ahead and start?
Sure, happy to. Well, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to be talking with the group today. And so I guess my background, I started off in basic plant science. I worked with Natasha Reichel at UC Riverside on plant cell biology, and I kind of as a side project in cloning a couple genes, really got into kind of, I guess, laziness as the mother of all invention, where, looking for subcellular phenotypes and trying to clone these genes, I thought, there must be an easier way to do this, and found an automated microscope that we then adapted for use in plant tissues. And it was really kind of a challenging project that kind of led me kind of following this path of using enabling science to move into the, I guess, the technology development aspect of plant biology and really applying discoveries in engineering and automation to help improve how we do plant science. And so that one kind of side project was able to spur discoveries in a number of other areas where other people were able to clone a number of other genes that were just nothing related to vacuole trafficking, which is what I was working on. It led to chemical genomics as a field really getting started with this type of technology. And then I moved into DuPont Pioneer, where I did some more postdoc work on basic science, basic biology of how hormones affect plant stress responses, but then looking again into that automation and imaging and all of that, building automated phenotyping facilities for DuPont Pioneer, moving to phenotyping at Purdue University, where I headed up the phenomics core there most recently, and then now taking that automation, plant growth, and horticulture. So I'm still an adjunct faculty for horticulture at Purdue University, but also now I'm heading up R&D. Hey, boiler up, hammer down, where I'm now leading R&D and automation, biology, kind of enhancing organoleptic properties, and all of the kind of, I guess, ins and outs of how the plants respond to their environments in this large production vertical farm application in Newark, New Jersey, which is super, super cool. So it's really exciting, kind of, strange kind of diverse career path, but here I am. So anyway.
Well, we've got loads of questions for you, but let's go ahead and introduce Miguel real quick too, and then we'll open it up.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start kind of chronologically, but first, just to let you know that I'm actually from Ecuador. I've been in the U.S. now over 16 years and came here for grad school. So I graduated from my university in the biology program. And in Ecuador, I had to do a research program, a research thesis in order to get my undergraduate degree. So when I was looking for options to do that, an opening came up at the International Potato Center. So this is an international center that has a headquarters in Lima, but had a research station in Ecuador, in Quito, very close to my house. So I decided to explore that opportunity and started understanding a little more how agriculture can become part of a scientist's career, because my department in biology was very focused towards very basic aspects of biology. They had a lot of focus on ecology and taxonomy and a little bit of molecular biology, but all focused around either plants in a very basic sense and not an economic sense, and then humans and then bacteria and all of that. and other stuff like that. So when I joined the International Potato Center, I discovered basically how you can use science in an agricultural setting, and I get hooked. So I got my experience working in a plant pathology setting, characterizing isolates of a pathogen called Phytophthora infestans. It is a very major pathogen of potatoes and tomatoes, and got then interested in pursuing a master's degree and contacted a faculty member at Ohio State University that had a program in Phytophthora research. So I joined her lab for my master's and worked on the Phytophthora disease of soybeans and focusing on the pathway for partial resistance of this pathogen, of soybeans to this pathogen. Then I got interested more in more of a molecular track. I really wanted to be a molecular biologist. I realized that doing basic plant pathology was not really my thing. So I stayed in the same department, but joined functional genomics rice laboratory with Dr. Nguyen Wang in Columbus, Ohio. So my master's was in the Worcester campus. I moved to Columbus for my PhD. 5 years on various aspects of characterizing a pathway that was linked to disease resistance and also ubiquitination and RNA binding and flowering time. So very interesting link of different pathways and responses in plants that led me to characterize this pathway in a little more detail. And then after I left, some folks actually validated what I had found in rice in Arabidopsis, which was really nice. Got a few publications out of that. But when I was ready to do my postdoc, I realized that I wasn't really interested anymore on working in the plant microbe interaction and in signaling field. I felt like it was getting really crowded, decided to move to something new. And at the time, the Department of Energy of the US had funded about 3 big bioenergy research centers, and one of those was in California. And I got in touch with Pam Ronald at UC Davis, who at the time was leading the grass genetics group at the Joint Bioenergy Institute. So this was a DOE-funded bioenergy research center. And I joined the group to work on plant cell wall biology. So we started a program to characterize the specific aspects of grass cell wall biology. We had another group that worked on aspects of dicot cell walls using Arabidopsis as a model. We were focusing on grass cell walls using rice as a model system. So I used my expertise in working with rice in a molecular genetics sense to develop that program from scratch with Pam and other postdocs, because none of us had experience in plant cell walls at the time. So it was really interesting and challenging at the same time. So we managed to develop forward and reverse genetic screens to characterize cell wall function in grasses. Published quite a few papers in that field, and got to get known as, I became now a cell wall biologist suddenly. That wasn't really on my plans, but that's how my career took me. During that time, I started, like I said, as a postdoc, but then a year and a half after that, I was promoted to deputy director of the group. So basically, I was the co-PI of the grass genetics team at the Joint Bioenergy Institute. So I had responsibility to actually manage our program at a research facility in the Bay Area. So I was part of the leadership team of the Institute and managed to control basically our representation of the group from the Bay Area, but also connecting it to the UC Davis group that Pam was still part of and at the university. So it was a really nice experience that allowed me to get a lot of leadership skills and ways of managing a research program. We wrote the proposal that funded the program again for 5 more years. So we got another $150 million through that, which is another nice experience to work on a collaborative research proposal, grant writing with, I don't know, about 50 different scientists that were involved in writing this proposal. So that was pretty amazing. And at that time, so I had spent about 6 years at the Joint Bioenergy Institute, and then again, I guess I get bored every 5 years and decided to do something else. And industry sounded like a good and interesting career path, especially because I learned that Monsanto had a program called the Emerging Leaders in Science. So this is a program that recruits scientists from the academic world that had no experience in industry. And you join the company to do a rotational program, 3 years, 3 different roles through that process. You go through a very intensive interview. It's a 3-day interview with many leaders in the company, and then I went through that process, got the job, and did 3 different rotations in 3 different areas of the company in the R&D space at Monsanto. So I first worked in the chemistry space in insect control using RNAi as a topical control measure. So instead of using a transgenic approach for RNAi, we actually spray RNAi on the crop and it controls insects. I did that for a year. The second year, I did a rotation in the regulatory affairs organization, working on the regulatory strategy for genome editing. You know, this is something that Monsanto is investing pretty heavily, so I was involved in helping us figure out an internal strategy on how we're going to treat gene-edited products in our pipeline. And then the next and last rotation, I moved from regulatory to the breeding organization, and I worked, kind of leveraged my expertise on genome editing regulatory aspects into helping us figuring out the deployment path in the breeding organization for genome-edited products. So I was able to develop a plan to get our first genome-edited product to the field, from the lab to the field, following our internal guidelines and USDA guidelines to make sure that we were compliant with those rules and regulations. And now, after those 3 years of doing this program, I'm actually in what we call the landing role. So this is my final role after the program, and I'm back in regulatory, still doing the regulatory strategy for genome editing, but also working on our insect control trade pipeline. So I have a dual responsibility to make sure I align the regulatory requirements for specific products in insect control and genome editing with the rest of the R&D organization. So it's a really cool scope that allows me to interact with many scientists within our R&D program and even in a commercial organization as well.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure that we will have questions from the students, and while they're thinking of them and getting ready to either unmute themselves or type them in, whichever they prefer, I will go ahead and ask you both to talk about a little bit the differences between, because you've both had lots of experience in academia and industry. So what, in your mind, are the sort of key differences in terms of a career, and also maybe the pros and cons as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Shall I?
Yeah, go ahead, April.
I think there's a lot of myths around differences between academia and industry. One being kind of this, relative perception of the amount of freedom that you have. And I think that, there's a perception that you can work on anything you want to in academia, and in industry, you can just have your project shut down tomorrow and, just kind of be under the mandate of kind of the corporate umbrella. And I think, there's some truth to that. There's reasons that there would be, maybe misnomers in some extreme cases. But I think for the most part, in either situation, you're kind of beholden to the climate of what's say most interesting to society as a whole, either through funding agencies in academia or through company interests, which in a lot of cases tend to overlap quite a bit. So so I think that's one aspect that I didn't see as particularly accurate as something that you might perceive as a big difference between industry and academia. I found a lot of freedom in industry to do research, even as a postdoc, even as a young research scientist, coming right out of graduate school. And I don't know, Miguel, if you have similar experience with some of your younger scientists. You're given projects just like you would in any other postdoc, but you have kind of a lot of choice around how you attack the problems, and you just have to make cases to your leadership about the scientific merit and why a particular approach is warranted, which I think is just the same as in a grant writing process to get funding. And so that was one of the things that I think I had a perception of very big differences that I was pleasantly surprised about industry, maybe having more freedom than I thought I would. So that's one aspect.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I think that that's a misperception that you don't have a lot of freedom, or that you're tied into only focusing on things that are going to make the company money. So there's an area in the pipeline that is discovery, and that's an area where you can explore a lot of different options that could tie into a product line or not. And that's when you get a lot of creativity and opportunities to develop research projects that would almost look like an academic lab, right? It's not going to be really focused on the basic aspect of science. You're probably not going to do that, or the industry is not going to invest a lot in that, in those very early, very risky projects. But there's still a lot of risk that companies like Monsanto and Pioneer take in making sure that that could potentially lead to a product. So in during that phase, you get a lot of freedom. Now, when you move more into the product development phase, that's a really different area that you don't get to experience in academia at all. And that's where being at a company like Monsanto or Pioneer is really great, because we have the expertise to actually get these to market, right? Mm-hmm. So then your focus becomes on how you get this to become a product. So you still use your scientific skills to do that, but now you're actually learning how to develop a product in alignment with the commercial expectations, because farmers really want something that works every time. They're not going to reward you with their business if your product fails or doesn't meet the product concept, right? So those are very different aspects of doing science, I think, and at that stage it becomes really different to be in industry versus academia. And another aspect I want to mention, not related to the research, is, for me, the biggest change is the focus on personal development that industry puts in their employees. So really, we are accountable for developing ourselves, not only as scientists, but as leaders in the company. And you have a lot of resources and a lot of mentors and coaching and training around that aspect. And I think that is really lacking in academia. You don't get to, professors get put into this in these programs where they have to actually get funding and educate, but not necessarily have the necessary skills to manage a lab and manage relationship with students and address conflict when it arises, and work in an environment where we actually have to compromise with different people, right? So I think that's something that industry does really, really well. I really appreciate that, because it's a focus on the person in their careers as how they develop and how they can move ahead with an actual plan for success.
Did you experience that too, April?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it was something that being in academia, your mentorship and your development is really in the hands of your supervisor, and where at the company level, talent development is something that has a company-wide interest, and that really we all are accountable for. And so I learned not just about how to develop myself, but about how to develop people that were underneath me. And that was something that I really like about industry, is having really talented people that are career scientists that might have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree in some cases, but people that in academia are just kind of transient. So students that come through, once those students graduate and move into careers in industry, that you could have someone that has 20, 30 years experience working as a technician that really wants to be a technician. I likened it kind of to the military, if anybody has experience with that, where you have really excellent staff sergeants who have been leading a brigade or whatever it is for many years, that just want to be in the lab, and that there's so many opportunities to do that in industry, and there's really not in academia. To maybe a few technician positions here and there, but they're very, very competitive, very few and far between, and it's usually people that came up through the organization. So that would be something else I would contrast, is that there's a lot of opportunities for people without advanced degrees to lead and to excel as scientists. And I see that even more in the small companies than in the large company. It's really kind of a neat environment.
Okay, look, we've got a question from Rochelle. Both of you have had many different positions in many different places. Excuse me. Do you feel it is necessary to move positions to be successful in industry? Do you need to be willing to get up and move at any time?
What do you think? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Say what you think. I don't think you need to. No, not at all. I think the majority of people that I worked with at Pioneer were people that were there for 10 years or more. I personally have gotten up and moved quite a bit. Just because I've not actually ever looked for a job. I've never applied for a job, mostly just through networking. But I tend to be kind of a restless person anyways, so, you know, things have just kind of fallen in my lap that seemed like really great opportunities. And, you know, especially this most recent move was a big risk to go from, you know, a university position that was a dream job to, you know, a startup in a place I had never really been or lived. So for me personally, that's worked well. But you know, I don't think it's a requirement in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a different aspect of once you're in industry, and at least how Monsanto works. So I have only experience with working at Monsanto. Is once you're in the company, you really drive your own career, right? So if you want to change roles frequently, you can do that, and the company actually lacks that though. So Monsanto is probably unique compared to other companies, I think, because very few people stay in the same role for more than 5 years. So I've seen people that stay 2 years in one role, then move to do something else, experience different areas of our R&D organization. And the program that I joined, this program where you do 1 year rotations for 3 years, was trying to mimic that aspect, right, of getting the people to experience different areas of the company, get a breadth of perspective, and understand our pipeline left and right, and actually then you become probably a better employee that way because you've experienced different cultures within the company, different aspects of our R&D organization, and since we're a very dynamic organization, people learn fast at Monsanto, you pick the stuff up really quickly. So there can be a drawback sometimes when you're in a very key position and you want actually more history of someone staying in specific roles. So there's that as well. So if you're not interested in moving that much and just becoming an expert in your field in a specific area, you can do that, and Monsanto allows you to do that. But at the same time, the majority of employees 2 to 3 years in a role, and then they move on to something else. Now, you don't have to leave St. Louis. If you really want to stay in St. Louis, you can explore those different career options in the same area, but you can also leverage the fact that we're a global company and you can find jobs in other countries, right? In Europe, in South America, in Asia, you name it, right? So it's up to you. And I don't really think, like, as April said, that you need to move around a lot in order to be successful or find the career that will be fulfilling. It's just what works for you, and personal reasons can also be something that ties you to a place, and that's totally fine.
All right, we're still open for questions, but I have one actually for April. I think most of us know more or less, to some extent, what Monsanto does, but I think probably not everybody knows about AeroFarms. Could you tell us a bit about AeroFarms and what they're doing, and also maybe the business model behind it?
That's a great question. So AeroFarms is the world's largest indoor vertical farm. We produce baby leafy greens, but we've grown over 300 other crops with kind of in R&D focus, but also in product development and testing. So our core business model, originally we started in 2003 with another university professor, Dr. Ed Harwood, was faculty at Cornell University, and Ed came up with this idea of growing plants on a cloth media with aeroponic mist coming from underneath the cloth that would mist the roots with kind of an ideal nutrient solution. There's been a lot of research around hydroponics, aeroponics, and the best way to do that. And growing these plants in artificial lighting in kind of stacked layers that you see in some some architectural renderings of cities of the future, having these integrated vertical farms. And so that's really kind of our business model, but it started off with selling the technology to architecture companies that wanted to build and, say, have a farm inside of a building in a major metropolitan area. The business model now, in just realizing kind of the operational challenges around one of these farms like this, is to either use reclaimed buildings or purpose-built buildings that are just built just to be farms, and then have like a clean room approach where, you know, for food safety concerns, it's really important to have no pest pressure introduced, but we grow without pesticides inside reclaimed and purpose-built buildings. And the business model is any city with more than 1 million people being able to sustain one of these large production farms. So we're on our 9th farm right now here in Newark, New Jersey. I'm actually sitting in farm number 8, which is this paintball warehouse. Farm number 9 is that's the world's largest indoor vertical farm in a reclaimed steel factory. Farm number 10 will be in Camden, New Jersey, and that's right across the river from Philadelphia. So another purpose-built facility. So my job in R&D, like I said before, is to improve the growing systems with each build and each iteration, so that we're using less water. The figure right now is 95% more water use efficiency, better than traditional field farming, and then doing that on up to 390 times more efficiency in land area. So it's a big challenge, you know, balancing energy input efficiency, so trying to use sustainable energy to drive these LEDs, and then also to, you know, to balance the cost of energy and inputs like fertilizer and water against the you know, getting the necessary amount of yield to be able to make the business model work. So our business model is selling to retailers locally. So we sell at Whole Foods markets in the New Jersey area, and then also in the largest kind of standard supply or standard grocery store chain called ShopRite, like it's similar to a Kroger in the Midwest or something like that. So we also do bulk sales. We have Fresh Direct, where we mail out. It's the largest direct-to-consumer mail order grocery company in the area also. So it's pretty cool business.
Wow. Juniper asks, would AeroFarms also be opening in a developing country?
Yeah, so we're doing development in China right now. Is of course a really booming area, although I'm not sure you would consider China a developing country. But so looking at China and the Middle East, particularly where resources are limited, in areas where there's kind of a consumer drive for premium produce, so like the organic markets and things like that. So maybe in a developing country, you know, where there's food security issues, I think there are markets, but I think it's more of it's a higher end, higher price point produce solution to increase maybe nutritional profiles in areas where there's a lot of people. That's, I think, the area where I hope to have the most impact on this, you know, food security.
Miguel, I have a question for you, which is that through the program you've gotten a lot of additional training in, it sounds like in policy and in kind of pipelining and stuff. Is that something that somebody should get some exposure to before they start thinking about a career in industry? I mean, I always get asked, how do I get into industry? What kind of preparation should I do now during my master's or PhD? Both of you kind of did a normal PhD, right?
Yeah.
So you didn't necessarily plant the seeds of industry at that point. What would you advise for a PhD student who knows that they'd like to explore industry?
So I think a couple of things. Really focus on being a good scientist, right? So even though you have a career that may not involve doing a postdoc and an academic track, and having tons of publications and becoming a scholarly expert in the field, I think you still really need to show an industry that you're a good scientist, right? That you can do and publish work very well and with high standards. So I definitely encourage students to continue developing as a scientist, and, you know, having really challenging research projects that expose them to learning cutting edge and making sure that their science is publishable and things like that. So really do not lose focus in really getting the degree with with really good formation in science. The other thing is try to understand what it would be like to be an industry scientist and do some internships if possible. There's companies that offer internships during the summer where you can actually work on a research project with a mentor from industry, and then get to understand what it is that is required. I would have liked to have that, because when I came to Monsanto with no background whatsoever in industry, it was a shock, right? I mean, nothing really prepares you for that. I think in my case, it was a little easier because I had worked in this multidisciplinary bioenergy research center where you actually are not really in an academic setting. It's more of like a startup system that is a little different than the traditional academic lab. And I had a lot of different stakeholders. I had to work across my own area and interface with people and in different areas of science, like chemical engineers, microbiologists, bioinformaticists, plant biologists like me, the whole range of different expertise. And that, I think, was useful for me to transition to industry, because then that's what you're doing in industry, right? I mean, you have your area, but then you have to collaborate and really excel as a team member and an efficient team member. So if you can get an experience doing your research project that allows you to do that, I would encourage that. Or try to do an internship in industry and get to know what it is like from the inside.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so as a hiring manager in industry, maybe some specific skill sets that I'm always looking for and that I was looking for at Pioneer were people that had kind of maybe multidisciplinary training. So someone that's not just a really excellent plant biologist, but also somebody that particularly has data science as a secondary skill set. Somebody that maybe has some maybe computational applications of biology are people that I just can never seem to find. So not so much somebody that has business training. And I had a lot of people that, you know, in career fairs and things like that, and when I was working at the university, like, you know, should I get an MBA to go work in industry and biotech or whatever? And I'm not sure that that is particularly helpful, but really be, like you say, Miguel, about being an excellent scientist. If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly, but also know what it's like to be a black bear, and be able to communicate effectively across those disciplines, because that's really a skill that I'm always looking for. So maybe some more specific ideas about how to get involved at your institution. Find out, especially if you're early on, if you're still doing rotations and you haven't chosen a PI yet, find out what faculty are working in collaborations with industry already. And at Purdue, I know a lot of people in the agronomy department were working with industry, that there were opportunities even to have like a joint advisee relationship where you can use those faculty to connect you with the scientists inside the industry, where, you know, it's hard to field questions specifically if, you know, if everybody knows Miguel and Phil Taylor and myself, you know, and just send us emails. We're relatively limited in, you know, having access to open positions or even internships. But if you can work through your institution and find the labs that are collaborating, then those people in those positions in those companies then might have some leeway to say, hey, you know what, I wasn't planning on putting in for an intern this summer because it's a lot of work for a scientist, but maybe if they know you and they know that you're a hardworking graduate student, there's already some synergy with your PI and them as collaborators, that you could go work for a summer and it wouldn't take away from your graduate studies, because, you know, some faculty members might be hesitant to let you go to work for Miguel or me for the summer doing something that's just totally unrelated to your degree. So if you're really interested in that, I think that would be a good path, especially if you're early on.
That's great advice. Beverly says, when is a good time to apply for industry jobs, like a year or a few months before graduating?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, so if you're coming in after your graduate degree, I would say start applying a few months before or exploring what are the options that are available or jobs that are opening. So I think that's I don't think it's a rule of thumb. What do you think, April?
I think it's unfortunate, but it's hard to apply for a job, and you know, the candidate pools are, you know, you'll get hundreds of applicants for each job opening, so it's incredibly competitive, just like in academia. So and again, just like in academia, if you know someone that knows your work, that's worked with you in the past, that can say, hey, Beverly is a rock star at you know, cell biology, but she also knows a lot about statistics, and she might be able to help kind of drive your program in this other direction, or, you know, just something where somebody has a personal connection through your networks is really, I think, the best way to move into any career path, industry or academic.
Yeah.
Which is hard, you know, that's like almost impossible to say, well, how do you do that?
And I guess another option is, I know folks that have gone to career fairs and meet at the conferences and met with recruiters from the companies.
That's
so
great.
you get your CV out there, you get noticed, you get in a database, and really be aggressive at keeping in touch with those recruiters, because they may be looking for people to fill positions. They're the ones that actually know what's coming, what are the jobs that will be needed, and they may get in touch with you and let you know, hey, I have this coming, are you interested, right? So do not underestimate that aspect of networking.
That's good.
And start off on networking with industry scientists at meetings. You know, I go to ASPB every year, I go to other meetings and functions. So make sure to stay in touch, and if you're really interested about it, we can start talking a little more in detail, but networking is extremely important, and that's something that I would stress very heavily as part of your development. You know, don't underestimate that.
How important is LinkedIn?
Pretty good, I think. I've gotten some, especially now that I'm in regulatory again, I keep getting recruiters asking me to apply for jobs. It's pretty interesting. There seems to be a need for expertise in regulatory aspects in industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever hire through your LinkedIn community, or are you more getting headhunted through it?
I use LinkedIn kind of as a discount double check. So I've used LinkedIn. I've kind of you know, there's like corporate accounts for LinkedIn that I had no idea how it all worked. But I think it's important as kind of I call it like a clean bathroom scenario, where you don't notice a bathroom unless it's dirty. You need to have your LinkedIn needs to be professional and up to date. You need to have a good headshot. You need to have, you know, your current experience and have it all up there. But it's really just kind of the basic level of putting yourself out there. I don't think it's, you know, it's not an end all be all, but you have to have it. You got to clean your bathroom too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to get back briefly to the discussion that we started with, because the question that I always hear is this myth that you have no control over what you do if you work in industry. And certainly that's something I heard, you know, as a student, and I keep hearing 30 years later from current students, oh, but you know. And so I was in Monsanto when I went to St. Louis this summer and was chatting with Miguel and some of the people in the Future Leaders program, and of course I raised this question. And I can't remember if it was you or Amy, but somebody said that it was actually kind of nice to have this pressure, maybe not pressure, but culture, in which if a project wasn't working, you know, it was valued for you to say the project is kind of hitting a wall, it's not going forward. Whereas I think in academia, we write a grant, we get partway through a project, and you can't drop it, right? You have to, you know, push through and get some horrible, mediocre paper because it was a rotten project or something. But, you know, I can see why it would be kind of liberating to, when you kind of realize, oh, this really isn't working out the way I'd hoped, you know, that it's a good thing to drop. And I don't think that filters through to academia.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
there's a concept of fast failure that you hear about. It's kind of, you know, corporate mantra. If something's not going to work, we want to know about it right away. Push it until it fails, and then move on to the next thing. And I really like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that happens at Monsanto, but I think it doesn't happen enough. A lot of the times, we really wanted to make it work, and we keep investing and time and effort in making it work, but we're getting to a point where we're also rewarding people for killing projects that shouldn't go forward, right? And
Right.
that's actually, it is hard because as a scientist you're invested and you really want it, you really want it to work, and it's similar to being in a lab in academia, right? There's something else to try always, right? But there's a point where you know that it's not going to be beneficial. The cost benefit is not there, and then you just say, you know what, I'm brave. I'm going to say, give my manager the option to pull the plug and say, this is not going to lead us anywhere. And it is liberating and actually a good thing about industry, right? I mean, you have that option.
And I think also maybe not just to pull the plug, but to change course midstream, to say, hey, we discovered something else that's really interesting. I'd like to pursue this angle, or that this is petering out. I want to give it a shot, but we need more resources. I need to do, I didn't budget to do genome sequencing, but I think we need to do this, or we need to generate more mutants, or whatever it needs to be. That you have an option to course correct. If it's something that you didn't put into the grant, then well, tough. You're stuck with it. You got to do what you say you're going to do. But I think there's a lot more flexibility and and also a lot more resources to solve problems. And I don't mean just money, but having internal expertise where, in a collaboration sense in academia, it has to be kind of a one-for-one. I'll do this for you, you do this for me. This is how we each benefit. But in an industry setting where everyone has a common goal of, say, improving yield or improving flavor, that there's an incentive for people to help you when it's not helping them, and that you have a lot more internal expertise to be able to draw from, to make projects succeed or fail fast.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree with you.
Another question is confidentially more delicate in industry, and does it restrict collaboration?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of the things that we do, we can't talk freely about. We can't go and present about our research unless it's vetted by legal and it's almost there or published or filed on a patent, right? So yes, you have those restrictions. Absolutely.
Yeah. It maybe even to add to that, the same, it's, very similar way DuPont and Monsanto operate with stuff like that. It was really frustrating for me as a young scientist, as a postdoc, to want to go to meetings and talk about what I was working on, and just, transitioning from, into my first time in industry. That was really hard for me to not just be able to talk to my friends from graduate school about what I was working on. Kind of at a high level I could. And I guess now that I'm at a high level in a company that's it's a farm, it's a not a research company, but there's a very R&D heavy. So confidentiality is something that I struggle with my leadership. Just this morning on, where are we truly innovating, and where is kind of the industry standard, and helping leadership to understand that, like, it's okay to talk about X or Y because everybody does this. So that's not something that we own, and driving that, having conversations around that if you're working in an organization with a bunch of other scientists, everybody knows what's already out there, and it's okay. We do have to protect our before our publication so we don't get scooped, but you don't have to really explain some of the fundamentals of the science, and especially around confidentiality. That's something that I'm working through.
Wow, interesting. I think we're getting low on time. I would like to ask you both to talk a little bit about work-life balance in the different places you've been and how your current position kind of ranks compared to some of your former conditions. Go on. Positions is what I think I meant to say.
Do you want to start, Miguel?
Yeah, sure. In my current job in general at Monsanto, I think work-life balance has improved significantly. I think that's something that the company really values and makes sure that we take time off. Our vacations are part of our benefits, and nobody is going to frown if you take all your vacation and you enjoy it, right? I mean, those are one of the things that I really value, because I would always feel guilty that I'm taking time off because my project is important, right? No longer, I don't have that problem anymore, and that's built in the culture here at Monsanto. So it's a big improvement.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
And so I would totally echo that. And I think work-life balance is something that, especially as a woman, and well, maybe I'm sorry, I shouldn't be so sexist, but I think it's something. I think it's something that you, as a person, as someone, either with a family or without, you need to really be assertive about your work-life balance. If you're drawing a line to say, I have to leave at 5 every day to go pick up my kid, or I can't work on this over the weekend because I want to have time off, and it's okay to say that. And I think more so in industry or at the university, I think I had a supervisor that was also really a big advocate on work-life balance. Although, there's just times where if you want to be successful, you have to work outside of normal business hours. You have to travel, and that's just part of, I think, being a scientist. So working through having a support network to be able to enable you to do the things that you want to do outside of work is also really important. So, figuring where you want to draw the line, and then also figuring, what kind of support do you need, hire a cleaning person, hire a babysitter, don't be afraid to farm out those domestic tasks that help enable your career to be successful. If you don't drive as nice of a car, but you have somebody to fold your laundry, I mean, that's an easy trade-off for me. I think there's no shame in feeling like you have to do it all. And I think so many people feel that pressure that I did, especially early on, that, as a female and as a scientist, I have to do everything. And it's not the case. Just pay somebody to do the stuff you don't want to do.
Okay, we have one more question. How well does industry support early career scientists? How do companies set up established industry scientists to be effective mentors?
I guess I can start with for early career scientists, you have a manager, right? So everybody has a manager in industry. Then even high-level managers have their managers, right? So you always have that person who can help you guide your career. But the message is you're driving it, and the manager can facilitate that aspect for you. So we encourage early career scientists to find mentors. And we also have our own mentoring program within technology, which is the R&D organization at Monsanto. So we match seasoned scientists and leaders with early career and mid-career level scientists in a mentoring program for a year, would actually get coaching from these very effective and successful leaders at the company to get these younger scientists to succeed and then get to that level as well. So we have different levels of training and then programs that are built in the company. And in that case, for example, for this mentoring program, you have to apply for it. So you have to have a good reason in your development plan to actually be eligible to be picked for this opportunity to be mentored and coached by a specific leader in the company. And the leaders of the company take this very, very seriously. So they take their time. They have a lot of flexibility and open door policy to meet with many employees in the company. That's something that Monsanto also values very well. And I'm assuming industry in general, you would get access to folks that are really high up in the company that would be willing to take 30 minutes of their time and meet with you and let you know about what they're doing and their career path and coach you and one-on-one situations. So I think that I value that very much because I don't think you see that very often outside of that industry.
The similar experience, and and I think you know, also where I found a lot of success, I was part of this accelerated leadership development process. So if there's programs like that, wherever you end up or maybe working, I would encourage you to be pushy. And, you know, sometimes people might be really good candidates for these types of programs, but their manager just missed the email, or your manager, you know, maybe is just busy and oh, you know what, you've been great for that. You know, push them. Say, I want you to nominate me for this award. I want you to nominate me for this leadership development process. I want to go to this training. I want to go to this leadership academy. And most of the time, if you have a good relationship with your supervisor, they'll say, oh yeah, sorry, I should have nominated you. Help them out, you know, write the nomination and say, you know, here's a swing at it. Here's what you know, here's the things that I've done well at, you know, and or give them some bullet points of what they could put in the nomination letter so that they don't have to take the time to do it, and you know, do all the heavy lifting. That you can do a lot of that for them. Make it easy for them to reward you, and also seek out people. You know, realizing that the senior scientists, they're all just people and they're all just figuring it out too. You know, I had a lot of success in just, you know, again, being assertive and saying, hey, I see this person, my mentor who I'm still in touch with at DuPont Pioneer, she was, you know, a young woman that was at the director level that had kids, and I said, you know, I see you as someone that I want to emulate. Can I talk to you? Can we go to lunch? I know you have to eat. I have to eat. You know, I'll bring some snacks or whatever, and you know, we're still in contact. And you know, so read books about how to be a good mentee, incentivize your mentors to want to talk to you, give them, you know, help them out with problems that they have in your spare time, and be a really active mentee. Don't just sit and wait for a program to come along that's gonna sweep you off your feet and lead you to development. It's all in, the ball is always in your court, and there's a lot of books. There's a book called Forget a Mentor, Find a Sponsor, and I can't remember the name of the author, but we can look that up and put it into the meeting notes. But that book really helped me to be an active mentee and to make mentoring relationships really worthwhile for me, and hopefully for my mentors, or at least they still return my emails. So
that's excellent advice. You know, I think we all start in science thinking that if we're talented, somebody will discover us, right? But the fact is, you have to really take control of your own career. And if that means drafting the letter of recommendation that you want your advisor to write for you, then that's what it means, right? So we've had a few things that we've heard repeatedly through our various conversations. You mentioned data science and computational applications. We heard that last week from Jason Williams at Cold Spring Harbor Lab and Lenore Reiser, who's at TARE. You also mentioned the importance of networking and communication skills. So I think we're starting to get a few kind of common themes going through these conversations. One of the assignments that our Conviron scholars have is that they will be doing informational interviews, which is, I thought about when you mentioned taking your role model out to lunch. So they'll be getting in touch with people, asking them about their day-to-day life, and you know, we may have some opportunities for them to talk to people in industry and just learn more about what they're doing. We're also, you know, we've invited you both to join the Conviron Scholars Network on Planté, and I hope that they can follow up with questions with you there. We've also got, I'm supposed to be working on this with Phil, but Phil and I have both been busy, but we're putting together an industry network on Planté with the idea that this is a place where, you know, maybe early career scientists who are curious about industry can start to talk informally with people in industry, again, about how do I get into it, what's it like, would I like it, that sort of thing. And I hope that, you know, we can all get some help from you guys on what we should do in this network and how we can move it forward. But really, I think we're going to wrap up. I really found this fascinating, and I know the students did too. And again, I hope we can continue these conversations. Are you with us, Melanie?
Yep, I'm right here. Yeah, and again, just echoing what Mary said, we do really appreciate you sharing all of this great information and knowledge with us, and, you know, especially with our scholars. I think we've all learned a lot, including ourselves. And, you know, we definitely appreciate the time that you spent in helping us put this together. And working with us on getting this workshop launched. So as Mary mentioned, the recording is going to be posted soon in Planté. I'll be sharing the link with everybody and notifying them of where this will be posted, and that way we can continue the discussion. They can continue to ask our panelists questions, and we'll include Phil on that too, in case there's any additional questions for Phil after you view his audio interview and the seminar he did for us last year. And as a reminder to our students to go ahead and take a look at the next set of workshops and register for them. And our next workshop will be next Wednesday, October 25th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time again, and our topic will be discussing exploring science careers in academia and government. And there's more information in the Conviron workshop network about who our speakers are for that. So again, thank you very much, and we appreciate everybody's time.
Thanks,
Yes,
everyone.
thank you. It was super, really interesting.